I'm building up my worth upon something which is transient, because at some point you are going to lose. At some point, you're not going to make it. At some point, you're not going to achieve what you thought you would achieve. And looking at it from that perspective, it brings this deeper question: who are you beyond rugby? Who are you beyond success, achievement, the win on the weekend? And that leads you to the existential questions of like this life. What is beyond this? What is beyond the game even? And so that's what's been the big driver in terms of, dealing with missing out on a dream.
Hi everybody, so welcome to another episode on the Lessons from the Game podcast with my co-host Begna. Today we have a very special guest. He's someone I had the privilege of playing alongside in South Africa with under 21s and the Springboks, a man who has always brought energy, passion and that unstoppable drive to every game he played. He was a force on the field, a leader at Toulon. He now is taking a completely different path, one of transformation, healing and self-discovery. He was once at top of the game in world rugby, lifting trophies, playing alongside legends and living the dream. But when the final whistle blew on his career, he faced different challenges that forced him to redefine his identity beyond the game. From the highs and the lows of the professional game to a journey of self-exploration in Costa Rica, the lessons he has learned, the struggles he has overcome, we'll be deep diving into that. But also talking about the pain he experienced in the World Cup in 2007, missing out on that dream. But we'll also explore how he found new purpose, the power of healing, and what fatherhood means to him now. Get ready for an inspiring and honest conversation with the Springbok legend, Joe Van Niekerk. Joe, brother, how are you doing, my man?
So good. Very well. Thank you. So good to be here, guys. Absolute pleasure.
No, it's good to see you, but Ben, how are you doing, brother? You good?
Yeah, but gee, really excited as well. Really good, thanks, mate. Yeah, it's great to see Joe, and a bit jealous that he's in Cape Town and that we're not.
Man.
But, yeah,
I'm just missing out on those Gatsby's in Cape Town, man. You know, those Gatsby's I miss. I always talk about when I speak to someone from Cape Town. Joe, welcome to our show. Super pumped, man. I've got goosebumps. I've got a paddle game after this. This is exactly what I need. I feel sorry for my colleagues because I'm going to come in. I'm guns blazing, man. Guns blazing. You do this to me every single time. Joe, man, tell me, where you at the moment? I've recently seen that you've relocated. You've gone out of the jungle. You've gone back to civilization. Where you at the moment?
Thanks, Coach. Coach G. So good. Yeah, thanks, Ben and Coach. Thank you for having me here today. Yes, at the moment I'm in Noordhoek in Cape Town in the deep south. And yeah, just really enjoying being out here. And we actually, we've rooted down for some time now. We've set, I think, a 12-month process that we're in right now, me and my small family. So we're settling in a bit and just getting our roots down. Because for I think it's been about the last year and a half, we've been really moving around a lot. So it's just really awesome to be back in South Africa, rooting down. And then just connecting with the community here and with all the people down in the deep south.
Awesome, man. I'm so jealous, man. With South Africa, managed to visit a few times in the last 2 years. So, quite jealous, but it's great to see you settling down back in South Africa. It's unbelievable for everyone back at home. So for all the South Africans, make sure to connect with Joe while he's back, because you never know on what other journey you might be going. You might go on a boat or a yacht and sail around the world or something like that. But just, my man, I firstly want to congratulate you. You became a father last year. All right? Wow. Big Joe, a dad. And I know it was tough growing up without a father, but tell me, how empowering has it been feeling being a dad?
Oh, gee, as you guys would probably know, as you would know, having kids, it's something which you can't really explain until you've actually gone through these processes. And, having a baby boy was, it's just, the unconditional love that I feel for him is, beyond of what I could say or what I could express in words. It's really hard to explain. And I never realized that beforehand, before having kids. But now I truly understand what it's like to be part of a process of bringing another life onto this planet. And yeah, just being his guardian and his support and his guide. And yeah, it's just been an incredible journey so far. And yeah, feeling really blessed, Garth, feeling very, very blessed, yeah, to have done it. I thought at some stage I may not ever get there, but I met a wonderful woman, and then things aligned, and it happened really spontaneously and naturally. And I think that was the beautiful thing. It wasn't a preconceived idea. It was just, it manifested in a most beautiful way. And I think that's what I feel most grateful for. Yeah.
Man, I'm so happy for you, Joe. And you deserve all this happiness and joy with your family. It takes me back to when we were playing together. Oh man, when you would walk into a room, you just brought energy and great vibes. You lived and breathed it. You get these people that are fake about it. They're going, woo, this plastic energy. You were like the pioneer back in the day when it came to energy. We always talk about being an energy giver or energy vampire. I can tell you this, you were killing those vampires and they couldn't exist. You opened, the sun was shining on them, they would explode and they were gods.
Oh, sure.
Oh man, sorry, I need to contain myself. I'm just so pumped for this this pod, Joe. Joe, we start this episode. It's the Lessons from the Game podcast, and what we're trying to do differently is to share our knowledge and our experience with our audience. We want to inspire them. We want to impact change. That's what we want to do. This is not a rugby show. That's not what we're trying to achieve with this. And we start off every single podcast with the same question. What is the one lesson that you have learned from the game of rugby that you can share with young players or coaches that either want to play at the highest level or become the best version of themselves?
So that one lesson that I could possibly share with your viewers and with other rugby players and coaches, I think that for me growing up, it was really crucial having role models that I could look up to. And I think that part of that journey was also the mentorship, really having central figures in your life that can guide you through those processes. Because when you go from, playing schoolboy rugby and then into the under 20, under 19s or under 21 South African setup, and then suddenly you're jolted into maybe playing for the men's team. I mean, players these days are playing a lot more young. They're starting to play at 19 even. I mean, I know the great Skalkberger, he was playing at 19. So it's just, I think that it's that guidance and that role model that you can look up to, that you can go to, and you can have a safe space to be able to go and discuss the things that are going on for you. Because essentially when you get thrown into that level of performance, of pressure, it can be a lot for a young boy to be able to handle that, or a young man to be able to handle those circumstances. So for me, the one big lesson along the way was just really making sure that you do have those mentors in your life that you can model yourself upon, and you can work in a direction, and you can have that safe space to go to when you need it most.
Great, man. Joe, I think that's so true. I was fortunate to have some unbelievable mentors in my day. Whether it was at school, my first team coaches, obviously, my dad, my family, lots of people. But who are those mentors for you? Who are the key people in your playing career that help you navigate through that times? You mentioned there, you started quite young. There was a lot of pressure back on the day. Who helped you navigate through that space in those times?
So it's interesting, Gath. That's why I think that for me is such a central theme, because of the reason that I didn't really have someone. I'm saying from those initial stages, right, schoolboy, and then moving into the under 19 ranks, I had Coach Eugene Elof. I had him as a mentor, and he was a very strong figure for me in those like sort of formative years. Thereafter, it kind of, it faded away. When I moved down to Cape Town, I didn't really have a central figure, or specifically a male figure that would be considered a mentor. And I think that also losing my father when I was 14, I think that played into it, that losing my dad in my journey as a young, adult, or as a young teenager moving into teenagehood, I think that really affected me. And that's why you asked me that first question, what would you want to share with the viewers or with coaches or with players? I feel that in my life experience, that was something which I felt was potentially missing, because when I think about my path and the behaviors and all the different actions that I made, it would have been so wonderful to have that safe space, to have that person you can go to and just say, you know what, I've been feeling so much stress, I've been feeling so much pressure, week in, week out. I need a way to kind of release the stress. I need help. I need, whatever that may be. And so for me, that was a big theme. And so moving on in as I aged as a rugby player, I didn't really have that in my, later on in my career, let's just say that. Someone that, as what I wanted to just add to that, someone that really cares. Because it's one thing to say, okay, we're looking at this guy, we want performance, he's a machine, but really, really there with the heart and saying, hey man, I can see you're a human being as well. How can we help? How can I support you? How can I be there for you? That kind of, someone to lean on in that way. I think, I think that's why that's a highlighted theme for me in the process.
No, man, thanks for sharing that. It just takes me back, and it just, talking about being mindful of your teammates and stuff like that. And that just hit me, Joe. We all knew back then you didn't have your father around, and when those big games would come up, I can just imagine how it must have felt for you, when you had your support system around you, but that definitely not having your dad there, So firstly, from my side, no, my apologies for not being more empathetic towards that. It just shows us that we all consumed in our own little world, and it just hits home what you said is about caring, not just caring about your teammate, but everyone around you. That's so important. Being conscious of what other people are also in experience. So that's a massive learn of me. And man, massive respect for everything you have done and achieved, and I believe your journey is only starting, but listen here, I want to go quickly back to something which I've written down here. You came through the system. I remember watching you at Craven Week. I saw this eighth man hitting gaps, scoring tries from his own try line. Okay, might be over exaggerating, was your own 22, but you were coming back off, but you were fast, man, playing with the scrum cap and everything, and in my mind, when I saw you playing with the scrum, I was thinking of taking mine off, but when I saw how fast you were running, I thought, okay, I might as well just keep it on. But then again, today, if you look at it, Cheslin Colby, Kurtley Oren, so all these guys, the Power Rangers with their scrum racks, the scrum caps, there was something there. But, man, you touched based on it, there was a lot of pressure on you. I remember, if I'm not mistaken, you were 22 when you became Rugby Player of the Year. You were in the Springbok. I was there for your debut, I think. It was at Newlands. I was with Ashik Wise. We were partying of the Rising Stars. Like, yeah, our teammate's getting a chance. I remember that. And I remember as well, I was like, is this guy going to make it? This is Test Rugby. He's so young, But when you were on that field, like, you made for this, man. You go. But the question is, how did you deal with that pressure, being in that limelight? We saw Bob Skinstad, he was one of the first Boks to really get a lot of attention, the photo shoots and all these type of things. There was a lot of other responsibilities off the field as well. How did you deal with that pressure? Because people expected a lot of you.
Wow, it's a very powerful question and points-in question, because I think that most players that go, to that level, at some point they feel similar kind of pressure. And I think that going to that level at a very young age, as I mentioned, there's players obviously now going when they're 19, 20 years old, they're already playing, senior rugby. So I think it's been kind of it's been built into the game in some sense that we learn how to deal with the ups and downs of being within, these establishments of rugby and playing week in, week out. For me specifically, I don't think, personally, when I look back at it, I don't think I had all the tools to be able to deal with the pressure. I think that I kind of potentially masked it pretty well, so like, in sense of like, maybe inside there was a volcano going on, but outside I'm like, yeah, how's it, brothers? Like, just keeping the vibe up. So essentially, part of my strategy of dealing with it was just always to be in that jovial kind of positive mood, no matter what, And so I think that if I know now the tools that I have now and being able to release stress and pressure and anxiety and so forth, it would be a different ball game. It literally, I think the players now, what they've got at their disposal to really bring them into presence, because that's essentially what it is. It's like, when you're supremely present, you're in that moment, right? It's like the guy that's riding the wave. And we've all had this in our playing days. You become one with the wave. And it's the same thing, playing rugby, when you get a ball and you're drifting out and it's an unders line and you run that unders line and boom, you hit that gap and you go through the gap. That's being in the zone in that moment, and you become one with the actual process that you're in, and that's the zone. And so I feel like part of these tools and working with these things like meditation, somatic work, releasing energy, like doing these things really brings you into that place, and you can get there quicker. And when you're in a crunch moment, you can be able to access that and through that process. So, but to answer your original question, I think that I literally wasn't always capable of dealing with that. I dealt with it. I probably held a lot of that inside myself. And behind closed doors, I was, probably more emotional or releasing some of that stuff behind closed doors. But, with your teammates and in that flow, I would say that I kind of like just kept it within. But there was sometimes there was a volcano inside, that needed to erupt. So I think just knowing that all these tools that are available to us, and what's available to us now, I would say I could much better deal with it, from that standpoint now.
Joe, I'd love to know, if you could give one bit of advice then to your that 22-year-old guy who was making his debut, what would that be then?
That's such a beautiful question because, I look at this even within my coaching business. We sometimes do this exercise where we have our present day self, we have our younger self, and then we have our 78-year-old self. And we look at our 78-year-old self and we do an exercise where we look at that 78-year-old self and we say, what would your 78-year-old self say to your present day self? And so to answer that question right now, what would I say to my 22-year-old self? It's a big question. Looking back now, engaging in the things that I engaged in, extracurriculative outside of the playing field. Looking back now, I'd probably say to my 22-year-old self, just, contain some of this energy. But then I also look further back and I look at my 13-year-old self when I lost my father, and I say, okay, my 13-year-old self never knew how to deal with the trauma of losing my father at that point in my life. So what was the way to man up to get through that process was actually to man up and become the man of the house, and to take on all this extra responsibility, and to toughen up, and to not to allow for those emotions to be there, but rather to push those emotions down. And so that's essentially why I believe that when I got to that point of 22 years old, being in the Springbok team, player of the year, all of those things, I think that I was I was not really capable of dealing with it in the way that I would know now how to deal with it, how to be able to release emotion as opposed to holding emotion or kind of stuffing emotion down or avoiding it. I would be able to deal with it. I would go into a sacred space and be able to express it and be able to release it. So just tying into the 3 stages, like now looking back, I potentially know why those behaviors took place and why I was trying to release pressure and release stress, but not potentially in the best ways, and so now I know, okay, this is how we release those things, and then potentially that those nocturnal activities that took place may not have been the same as what they were.
Thanks, Joe. Pleasure, I wonder as well, I mean, it's a deeper question, but I wonder if you would have been the player that you were, and if you hadn't gone through all those hardships and experiences as well, and you hadn't been that type of guy that used that as a release and could switch off like that,
Yeah, it's an interesting one that I think that at that point in time, also the leadership responsibilities, it was almost like, because of not being able to deal with that traumatic event, because it's not specifically the traumatic event that's the issue. It's the actions thereafter. It's how you feel after that traumatic event. So I think that was kind of continuous as I grew into my adult self, without consciously knowing that was the reason for some of my behaviors. And so looking back on it in hindsight, you can always say, oh yeah, but what if, but in that moment, that was the best way I knew how to deal with the stress and deal with losing him at that age as well. So, but I do think that related to leadership responsibilities and leadership roles within the Springbok team, within other teams, potentially I wasn't given those leadership opportunities because of the reputation of a playboy, or the reputation, whatever people saw me as at that point in time in my rugby career. So yeah, looking back, I do think to myself, wow, things could have been different from that perspective. But then I also ask myself the question, but then you would have a completely different life path in some way, right?
Joe, I definitely resonate with what you just shared there, because myself included, there was a stage, those nocturnal events, those late night events. Yeah. And, if I look back at it, when I was still playing, I didn't have the tools to deal with pressure. And we all released it in the wrong way, whether it was going out late or having those 2 packets of sweets, chocolates, Pringles. If I look back at it now, my game routine was having a packet of salt and vinegar Pringles and eating a chocolate slab. Who does that? That's not a good routine. Well, as they always say, they always would say, you are what you eat, but that's another topic, so another discussion. Joe, what I'm enjoying about this podcast journey, it's allowing me also the opportunity to reflect on my own journey, but also being honest with myself. There were certain traumatic events in my career as well, certain things that happened to me that, that I potentially didn't deal with and carried on later into my adult life and potentially into my marriage as well. But speaking to former coaches and teammates, a lot of those memories are coming back up. And I caught up with Jake White the other day. I saw he was in Cast, so I sent him a message. Hey, coach, good to see you there. Best of luck with the team. And we just exchanged some voice notes, and it was great. I always have a great bond with him. And something I've been dealing with for so long, and I've been struggling with, and I've shared it previous occasions on the pod. It took me long to come to terms for not playing in the World Cup final in 2007. I felt for so long like a failure. I felt like a disappointment. I let down my family. And for long, I would say, oh, but they didn't play me. I was starting the test matches before the World Cup. And if I look back at it now, and obviously taking this time to reflect, A lot of that could have potentially been self-imposed. Like, was I fit enough? Did I show good pictures? Did the coaches trust me? And I'm still going to have that conversation with Jake. I'm due to have it. I finally mustered up that conversation to you. Not because I want to justify. I want his honest truth. Yeah, I know why he preferred us above me back then. It was the experience that he brought to the team, what he brought. So I know and acknowledge it being a coach now. So I'm interested. What information did I give him to make that choice so that I can evolve as a coach, but also so that I can move on as a human being? And I know you missed out on the World Cup in 2007, and you shared some powerful stuff. You said that you've built your worth on trophies, success, achievements, and selection. And then your body broke down. I know that covers a lot, but that statement is so powerful. If you can elaborate more in terms of what you meant back in the day, I know that's not who you are today, but what did you mean by building your worth around trophies and success and achievements?
Wow, yeah, it's such a big topic, right? And I think for a lot of the viewers, players, people out there, coaches even, this emotion of regret. I think, thanks so much for your vulnerability as well in this process. And I feel like part of the vulnerability is the healing that comes from this, being able to express this, but freely, and being open about, some of the things that you felt back in the past. Regret is always related to the past. And it feels to me that for many, many years before that 2007 World Cup, there had been a build-up of, being involved with Springbok rugby and being involved with, playing rugby and just being, building your worth. What that means is building your worth on the success that you have, on the achievements, and on whether you win or lose and all of those things. So literally feeling that feeling of like, okay, if I don't do X, Y, and Z, then I must be unworthy, right? I must be the opposite of what that is. And that comes to me when we're so identified with our identity. And what I mean by that is, I mean that we have a subconscious mind, right? Our subconscious mind is our programming, where we've been, our conditioning, who we think we are. And we can go very deep on that, right? Because but if you think about that, essentially, it's really just the tiny microcosm of all the other beings that are on this planet. They all have their own perception and their own view of reality, right? But if you connect it to the subconscious mind, it's really it's such a small point of reference if you think about it. And we are, as human beings, we are so much beyond what that is, because this is just our conditioning. It's where we've come from, what we've done, what our parents instilled into us, who we think we are, our projections, our judgments, our expectations, concepts, ideas, memory. All of that is within the subconscious mind. And so just looking at that and contemplating that, within rugby circles, we build up our worth upon how well we do, how many achievements we make, how successful we are. And it's a very thin line between saying, okay, I'm building up my worth upon something which is transient, because at some point you are going to lose. At some point, you're not going to make it. At some point, you're not going to achieve what you thought you would achieve. And looking at it from that perspective, it brings this deeper question: who are you beyond rugby? Who are you beyond success, achievement, the win on the weekend? And that leads you to the existential questions of, like, this life. What is beyond this? What is beyond the game even? And so that's what's been the big driver in terms of, dealing with missing out on a dream. Because as you would know, it's very layered, right? It's layered, Garth, because look, you went to the World Cup, brother. You were part of the 2007 World Cup winning team. even in your reality and in your subconscious mind, you're like, oh, I failed because I didn't play. But essentially, for me, looking from the outside, I didn't even go to the World Cup. So for me, looking at you saying, oh, he's part of the World Cup, 2007 World Cup winning team. So you can imagine the different degrees of perception and how we see things. And it's just interesting because it really brings in so much humility as well. When I think about it, I'm like, shit. I'm like, even you thinking like, oh man, like I wanted to be involved, I wanted to play, but you were there, you were part of it. From my perspective, I was looking out, looking in, and having been part of that for 4 years before, from building with that team, getting to the point and not making it. So brother, I sat with that for years. Like, look how long it is now. It feels funny when I think about it because it's so long. It's like literally it's 20, how many? It was 2007. So it's almost 20 years, right? 18 years or whatever that is.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because every time I'd watch a Springbok game, every time there would be a part of that in me. And the emotion that I felt of, watching you guys win the World Cup in 2007 from the sideline was bittersweet. You know what I mean? It was like, fuck, I'm so happy for South Africa. I'm so happy for my mates. But there was a part of me that was like, fuck, I missed out on the dream. And so carrying that for years, my brother, for years, until started really going into this work and looking at why are fragments of this still appearing in my physical body? Why are fragments of this still appearing in my mind? And then really coming to this realization that if I don't release this, I won't create space for where I want to be. And part of that, I think that a lot of the viewers and a lot of rugby players can relate to this. And I think that that's why potentially that post was poignant and was on point, because so many other human beings, not just in rugby, but in all sports, in all walks of life, can relate to regret. Because I think if you ask every single human being, you will probably come to a point where they'll say, yeah, I regret that I didn't do X, or I regret that I didn't do Y, or, whatever that thing was. And so it's a very common emotion to feel when, you haven't supposedly made your dreams, and what you perceive to be your dreams. So I don't know, did that answer your question or?
Yeah, no, it's brilliant. No, it's great. I think, Joe, for me, I was privileged and grateful being part of that journey, winning the World Cup. That was coming from we all know being a Springbok is bigger than yourself. It's bigger than the individual. It's about a nation. We've seen that in the last few years. Luckily, South Africa, we're doing really well, winning back-to-back World Cups. So that was I was very proud being there. And I always took that into consideration, the guys who couldn't be there, guys who were injured. And I remind myself, but what I'm just trying to say is that as years went on, that stuck with me. I always felt I had this point to prove. I always felt I wasn't good enough. And no matter even like winning a Super Rugby, at times I felt, okay, I'm still not good enough. And then you don't get selected. And, we can go on all that. There's a lot to dive deep into. But I really appreciate you sharing it. And then, bouncing back, I know we're accelerating a bit, but you went on to Toulon. Man, you became this legend. You've always been a legend in South Africa, rugby, but then you started this new lease of life and playing in France. I've been here now, we 2025, I'm here for 14 years already. Can you believe it? Yeah. But it's given me so much as well, gave me a different perspective and a different lease of life as well. But tell us a bit about the highlights, during that time at Toulon.
Guy, thanks so much. I really appreciate also just your kind words in just what you express and just feeling into that. I'm just so grateful, brother. Thank you for that. And just seeing your career and how it's taken off, and especially your coaching career, it's just been really impressive, man. Like I'm I'm blown away when I see the results of your team and how it's been going, and it's exceptional, brother. I'm so stoked for you guys. I'm so happy.
Thanks, man.
So no, it took a lot at that point in time. I think that we all come to those phases in our rugby careers where we have to dig deep and where we have to discover something else. And I think for me, I'd always been given things on a silver platter. That's what I feel like. That's what I felt like. I think playing rugby for me was just a passion. It was a love. I never really had to work that hard. I mean, yeah, of course I worked hard in the gym and I trained hard and I did my fitness and I kept up with that. But I always remember being young and being able to do all those things, and it just happened, you know. And so when I got to 27, I realized like all of that all fell apart. Like the World Cup, losing the World Cup. I mean, not losing the World Cup, not going to the World Cup, being injured, losing my girlfriend at the time, drinking really heavily, to deal with all the things that I was dealing with, and then not having a contract with South African Rugby. So all of those things happened when I was 27, and it was like my world was falling apart. And then it was like there was this little voice inside, and I think that was my true self, and it just kept saying, you got to go back to the drawing board. You got to go back to the drawing board. Because up until that time, everything had been given to me on a silver platter, you know, under 19s, under 21, Springbok rugby very early, all these things. Contracts, money, the high life, you know. And so what did it say? It said, go back to the drawing board. And when I went back to the drawing board, I literally started to focus on all of the essential things as a player. What do you focus on? You focus on your nutrition. What are you putting into your body? What are you feeding yourself digitally? What are you doing in terms of your sleep? What are you doing in terms of your training? Are you training more precisely? What are your gains? What are you looking at? So just taking a microscope and putting it on each one of these things and saying, okay, cool, this is how we're going to get back. We're going to go from zero to back. And fortunately enough, I got a lifeline to go back to the Lions. And at that point in time, I played per game. So I took a big hit in salary, but I played per game, and I ended up playing, I think, 12 games that season for the Lions, where Eugene Elof, he gave me a chance. So I got that chance again, but I took it seriously. I was like, okay, this is your chance, like, to really come back and forge a new career, in a sense, from ground zero. So when that happened, I then got the call from Toulon, and luckily, I was like, yeah, this seems like the best opportunity ever. So got back into the South African team that year afterwards, in 2008, played 50 caps. And from that 50 caps, I went to Toulon. And brother, from that moment, I knew this was the right decision. It was just, you know, everything fell into place. We had a beautiful coach, Tana Amanga, who was at the time, he was playing as well. We had Jerry Collins. We had the likes of some of the best players in the world. And yeah, I was fortunate enough to get the armband, and I basically just took it with both hands. I think I'd really reached that point of like being ready for it. And yeah, Toulon went from strength to strength, brother. As you know, in that stage of time, we really created some magic, you know. And I think didn't you guys get close to that, or you got a double? I saw you guys got a double. Like that's some feat, bro.
Yeah, with La Rochelle, we were fortunate enough to get that double, and you know, as a play in 2012 against Toulon.
Yeah.
Actually bumped into your teammate Jean-Charles, the hooker that played as well. So he was giving me grief for the scrums of 2012 final.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, wow.
Man, I know there's some threads you want to pull on there.
Joe, you know, that, so as an Englishman who was watching what was happening down in Toulon.
Don't say that too loud, Ben.
The accent's a giveaway. But we saw another incredible player who became one of your teammates, Johnny Wilkinson. And we saw this thing, and I think there was about 3.5, 4 year period between him winning the World Cup in 2003 before he then played for England again. Something crazy like that, And then many people thought his career was over. And like yourself, he ends up on the coast down there and is almost like has a new lease of life. You go there and you're just ripping it up and you're dominating and you're made the captain. And I think Joan Smith goes there, and then he has this incredible, new lease of life. And he's, he was written off back in South Africa. He was going to have to end his career. So what was in the water? What were you guys doing? That sort of, was it just a release of pressure, or what happened?
The wine. It's the wine.
Exactly. What was in the water?
Yeah, it's the rosé. It's the rosé from the south.
Was it just? Yeah. What can you give it? Yeah, man. What was going on?
Interesting one, because it's firstly, I think that coming into a very warm and welcoming team environment, because literally, like most of the players, like if I had to mention, it was players from all around the world. We had Australia, New Zealand, Fiji. Every country you can imagine, we had a player from there. So we had this really diverse cultures from all over the world. And I think that was potentially one of the strengths, but also this welcoming, because a lot of times, like when you go to a new country, as you would know, but as you go to a new country, there can be this impression that not as connected, and it takes time for you to like really merge with the ethos of the place and the people and all that. So coming straight into that team dynamic, into that environment that was very welcoming because there were so many foreigners, felt like a home away from home, if that makes sense, even though there were so many different nationalities. So it was like, I think that was one of the pieces. Obviously, the sunshine. I think Johnny hadn't seen sunshine for probably a couple of years.
He was in Newcastle before.
Okay. I think sunshine really plays into it. Like, I mean, being on the south of France, it's not a bad place to be. And if I remember correctly, I think he was in Bandol. Bandol is like one of the most beautiful places. It's like right on the ocean, beautiful sea views, like wonderful like sea energy and breeze. So I think that played into it too. And I think it was a combination of those things. And and then also obviously just this new lease of life, a new chapter turning over the page. I think psychologically, mentally, emotionally, when you step into something like that and you have been injured for a very long time, or you have been, maybe not playing your best rugby, or you've been, in difficult processes, when you step into that, and it's like a new lease of life. And then I think just the playing in France, it is a beautiful experience to have. I mean, for rugby players and viewers out there, like for me, it was one of the best experiences that I've ever had in terms of like my playing days. And then it's interesting looking at that because a lot of like Springbok rugby players, they stay in South Africa, right? And then they mount up this huge amount of test caps, which is also incredible. So either way you look at it, but then this life experience of being in another place, people living, talking, parlez-vous français, like engaging with the French and becoming French, actually, becoming Toulonnais, it was just such a beautiful experience. So I think that also the fact that they are so rugby mad in the south of France, and also obviously other parts of France, but rugby mad. So like, you're revered and you're held up on these pedestals and you're like the king, the king is here. And especially with Johnny, right? Like Johnny, boo, 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 boo. They pulled out the trumpets, when he came. I would also be flying high. Seriously. I'd be like, fuck yeah. Let's go.
There's so many things in that though, Joe. Like from the outside, it seemed like we talk about as coaches, if it's a happy environment, or, some people are always about the X's and O's, aren't they? But if you can create the right environment and you get everybody on the same page and everybody's pretty happy and they're therefore more confident, and it's unquantifiable, but there's so much to be said for that, isn't there? And then I guess the other thing I was always wondering was, by the time everybody gets a bit older, they are sort of worked out what they need and how their bodies work a bit better and what works for them, and that type of thing.
Yeah. So to answer your first question, I think that's the essential thing. And I mean, Garth would know, like Coach G, like having had success in teams, like one of the most essential thing is, because also the other way of looking at that is saying, okay, we're just going as tourists. We're there to receive our paychecks, and we're going to enjoy the sun and we're going to have some fun, but we're not going to be serious about the rugby. I think that is an internal thing from your leadership group. Your leadership group is responsible for, of course, coaches are also responsible around that, but they will be more the instigators of that energy, like kind of dropping little seeds of like, how do we bring this team, how do we bring each other closer together? And then the second thing is like, which I never forgot from playing at Toulon, was like every single so-called mercenary that came into that team played for the jersey. It was interesting because like if you're showing up as a foreign player and you're going that extra mile, like the ball's kicked and you chase as hard as you can and you catch that guy in his 22 and you've got him and you're nailing him and you're going, and that takes balls, right? That takes guts. But you're a mercenary, so you're playing outside of yourself and you're going. That shows to the other players too. That shows like, wait a minute, the Oaks are serious. We're not playing just to make up numbers. We're playing to freaking win. We're playing to smash these Oaks. And I think that's created within the internal, like the core players. They create that energy. And so if you have a very powerful like core group of players, senior players, like that can really like generate some gold. And then the second question was, yes, players, when they get to that age, for sure, they know exactly what they need and what they, like how they can get the best out of themselves. And also knowing, like in terms of training, like how much training. And so that's also, I think, part of the senior group. So the senior group will then, can also be to the coaches like, hey, do you think like we can maybe take a little bit less today because the players are feeling a bit tired? Or, just that open communication and transparency. But yeah, definitely players, as they get to those ages, we know our bodies more. We know how far we need to push to get those certain results. So yeah, for sure, it's having a group of players like that have played like 85 tests or have won World Cups. It just makes the job so much easier for a captain as well.
I was jealous. It looked amazing. I think we all were, doing what you love doing down on the South Coast, and then and winning as well. But yeah, G, what were you going to say, buddy?
No, I just, we're going to run out of time. Then I just wanted to jump on. Joe, we can go so long. Unfortunately, man, we need to keep today short because I need to go play a very important paddle game. But, Joe, you're going to be proud of me. You spoke about tools for players, rugby players today. I would like you to share a bit about some of his tools. I'll be honest, as a coach, we experience a lot of mental load, the pressure. Our team doesn't go do well. We take the pressure. What people don't realize in the modern day game, you get fired like that. And, your scrum doesn't go well. You want to find solutions, or you're struggling with this or that. So as a player, you experience pressure, but as a coach, you experience pressure. As a human being in general, you experience pressure. And something which has been great for me, I've never been, how can I say, a big fan of meditation because I thought it was taboo. It's just the way I grew up. Coming from that stigma. And obviously, I've been obsessed on being more productive, taking care of my mental wellness. And I started doing NSDRs, non-sleep deep rest, or yoga nidra, as they call it. Mm-hmm. And I'm telling you this, game changer for me. times when I'm feeling overwhelmed or I'm feeling stressed, and I feel anxious sometimes. Man, I'm sitting in La Rochelle, my other two kids on Toulouse with my wife. Sometimes there's certain things I can't deal with. We all got challenges in our family and our lives, and then sometimes there are days, I'll be honest, and this is why I do this part, is about sharing who I am. Then at times I'm like, I feel like crap right now. And then just by taking the time and just acknowledging how I feel and writing it down sometimes on the page and doing that mindfulness practice, and whether it's meditation, but I'm a big fan of the yoga nidra or the non-sleep de-rest. It just resets me. And you mentioned some, and I wrote this down. You need to feel it to heal it. And that really resonated with me. That was so powerful. So my question is, with this journey that you're on, this massive transformation, I can tell you this from the last time we spoke and on the pod, and my apology, I should have reached out to you a long time. We need to stay in touch more. But I see a crazy transformation. You were the guy that went into the jungle for 2 years, went off social media. The way you are speaking today, you can see there's hard lessons you have learned. You have acquired different skills. So for our audience, for our rugby players that are experiencing that pressure, what advice would you give them in terms to deal with that pressure? And if there are certain traumatic events they've experienced, how can they heal? Because we do know we are rugby players, but we have lives too. We lose a loved one, or we had a bad game, or it just becomes overwhelming.
Yeah, speaking into what you just shared now, I think this is really crucial in terms of like the mental health perspective of players and emotional well-being. I think that what I've realized, my brother, is that we can go week in, week out, pressure on, pressure on, pressure on, pressure on. At some point, that is going to burst, that pressure. And what does that mean? That plays into the thing that if we reach burnout, we want to go and do self-care practices. So why do we reach burnout and then we want to do self-care? So it's really gauging within your team, within yourself, what is it that I need to restore, to rejuvenate, to nourish myself? That could be so simple as going down to the river and sitting there for 1 hour. That could be so simple as going to rejuvenate yourself through yoga, or through, as you mentioned, the yoga nidra. That's a very beautiful way to rejuvenate yourself and to reset, as you mentioned. I think that it's tapping into that reserve inside ourselves where we're at peace, when we're in calm, when we're in stillness. It's really tapping into those spaces to rejuvenate and give us that energy once again to be able to go again. And I think that not getting to that point of burnout, but actually looking at your schedule. But when I say this prioritizing. So just as important as a rugby training, you prioritize your time, self-care practices for yourself. You prioritize those times for yourself in your schedule, and you write it down in your schedule. You say, okay, I can give myself an hour here. Okay, I can give myself an hour here, and look at your schedule and then say, okay, these are priorities. These are priorities. Because what does that actually say? That says to yourself, I'm putting myself first as well. And I think that that's where, just playing into that, your own ability to be able to de-stress and reduce anxiety is also why do we do meditation practices, and why do we come into stillness? Why do we come into calm? Well, you might say to me, oh, well, Joe, yeah, but even when I'm sitting next to the river, my mind is racing like a gun. It's rattling off. Then I would say to you, okay, but then are you able to observe that? Are you able to see that? Who's the one? Figure out who's the one that sees that. Because if I ask you that question and I say, hey, you come to me and you say, hey, I went to the river and I sat and my mind was just going off. So I say, okay, well, who knows that your mind was going off? This is the one that you need to discover, because this is the one where unconditional love, peace, calm, stillness, wisdom, that's where wisdom, calm, unconditional love, and peace and joy resides. So for all of the viewers and for the players out there, really consolidating and taking your time to give yourself what you need in terms of your processes and to be able to sit in those spaces. Obviously, there's also things like breath work, which I'm actually engaged in a 6-month certification process now related to breath work. And so you mentioned the Yoga Nidra. That's a very similar thing. It's dropping into this theta states where you drop into these states of absolute calm, where you are just aware of all the bodily movements, you're aware of sensation, of emotion, of thought, but you're not necessarily engaged in any of it. You're just in peace and calm. And it normally takes some time. If you've got a very active mind, monkey mind, most of us have a monkey mind, right? So it's like a Gatling gun. So it will take a little bit of time to really just drop into that space. And, you know, you can do guided meditation through Yoga Nidra, or you can do a guided breathwork session. I also find conscious connected breath is very, very powerful. It's called circular breath. So it's in through the nose and out the nose. You just allow the breath to drop out the body. So you breathe it in, and then what happens is you can also focus on breathing it into your belly, expanding your ribs, and then lastly into your chest. And then just allow the breath to drop out of your body. And you just drop it out of the body. And you do that for 45 minutes with a beautiful playlist or a soundtrack. And it is so therapeutic. It takes you to that place where wisdom is born. It's like after that, your insights, the insights that will come for you are so profound. It will guide you. It will tell, there will be, you know, after a process like that, it will just, little snippets of wisdom will be there at your access. So those are the two things. And then the third thing, Guth, is, as you mentioned, around trauma healing. I mentioned this before, but it's not specifically the traumatic event. It's how it makes you feel thereafter. As you would know this, like somatic work, right? We work with what's going on in the body. So breath work and, you know, conscious connected breath and working with the body is a bottom-up approach in healing. It's basically working with the body to access whatever trauma has been embedded there, whatever is stuck in the physical body, is to be able to access those points. Psychology is a top-down process where you use mind and talking to come to resolution. But a lot of times going from a bottom-up to a top-up process is allowing you to access parts of yourself that you didn't even know exist. And that's why I find this healing so valuable. I work with different modalities. I work with internal family systems, and I work with inner child healing, and I work with breath work, and also work with body work to be able to access the trauma that's stuck in the body. So we can get a physical trauma, but we can also have psychological traumas from our past. And as I said to you, it's a lot of times it's related to our childhood. We could be having a recurring thing as an adult, as our adult selves, because our needs weren't met when we were young children. So as you mentioned, around that fact of overproducing, or, you know, wanting to be better each time, but it never being enough, we could probably trace that back to your childhood and say that there was an unmet need. Maybe it was that your parents didn't acknowledge you, your parents didn't recognize you, and they didn't just recognize you for being, just for existing. There was always a condition on the recognition. So they would say, oh, you have to perform and you have to do X, Y, and Z, and then I'll give you recognition, but not just recognition for the pure fact that you exist. So I love you, my son. Well done. You stood up. Bravo. Well done. Giving this kind of recognition, validation. So that when we don't get that as our younger selves, later on in our lives, it plays out. And that can relate to overproducing, overproduction, needing validation from externally from others. So as you can see, so we work with different themes. Yeah, that's part of this beautiful work, of this healing work. Yeah.
Joe, thanks for sharing that. It's incredible. I think we need you on again because we're closing, and
Definitely.
I'd love to know more about how you're coaching people
That's my
now.
fault.
And
It's
how,
my fault. Sorry, guys. My fault.
No, well, we got a hard
No
close anyway,
worries.
haven't we? But it'd be great to know. Yeah, I'd love to know more about what that looks like for you every day now. Post getting back to South Africa, and then how you're coaching people and how you're helping people. I think we'd all love to, and also, there's so many practical steps there that are tangible. Because as you've spoken about today, actually, we want to help aspiring players, aspiring coaches, and everybody else as well. But yeah, thanks for sharing that. Joe, I've got one final question that we always ask everybody. If there's one lesson that you've taken from rugby, can you tell us what it is that you've taken from rugby and that you use in your life every day now?
Wow, there's so many things. Because I think also just wanted to mention that a lot of times we're talking about the struggles around, like, the adversity, the challenges. I think that rugby, there was so much beauty and so much amazingness and just incredible times that were had when playing rugby, and it was just such a love. It was a deep love for the game, and I think that rugby gave me so much. Like, when I think back now, I'm just so grateful for all those experiences, for my teammates, like some of the best brothers that I met in this life, like warriors, true warriors down to the bone. I think that one of the biggest things that I can say that rugby gave me was this discipline to show up for yourself. Now, in related to a spiritual path, would be showing up for yourself, right? For being able to be with the shadows and to accept all parts of yourself. Without that discipline in place, I don't think I would be able to have gone in this way, like a warrior through the internal world, and just slaying whatever needs to be slain in there. So it's like, what I'm most grateful for, or one of the biggest things that I'm grateful for, is the fact that rugby put us into this mindset of, like, having to show up and having to get certain, whether it was like to make certain goals and just to have a goal going forward, and really gave us like this purpose, this deep purpose to, like, whether we're playing for trophies or we're playing for things, we're going for things. And I think that just the mere fact that was lived out was such a gift, but also the ability to be able to show up and keep doing that. And I think that that's transferable into my life now, and just, showing up for yourself, but also for the people in your life.
Thanks, Joe. That's really good.
Joe, thanks for sharing that. Unfortunately, we've run out of time, and I would just like to ask you on the spot, because this is, we see these podcasts going on for ages. We won't be doing our audience justice if we stop right there. So I would like to officially invite you for part 2, where we'll be deep diving into your journey as a coach, what you've experienced, what you're doing to help everyday people, what you're helping to build teams. You're passionate about it. I would like us to deep dive, because I think there's so much more to share, and also to showcase your skill set and celebrate your skill set as a purpose-driven human being, and not as a former rugby player, because that's actually, for me, more important of the man you have become compared to the man who you were.
Yeah.
So
really good.
Everybody, thanks for joining us. For everybody watching our show, And if you're on Spotify, please leave a comment, share with us. And you can also connect with Joe. We will share his website in our show notes. Please make sure to connect and reach out to him, especially in South Africa. And please like and subscribe to our show. We would really appreciate it so we can continue having unbelievable guests. But that's us for today, Joe. Thanks for taking the time. I'm giving you a medical prescription to have a Gatsby on my behalf so that you can experience the pleasure that I would love to have right now. All right, guys. Cheers.